Hello, all. Welcome to this episode of 10 Minutes with Sam, and this is Akshat Singh. Today, we have former Ambassador Amit Dasgupta over here, and we would be talking to him about the various facets in which education has been affected in a post COVID world. Mr. Amit Dasgupta has previously served as a diplomat with the Indian Foreign Services, after which he joined a prominent business school and currently heads the India Outreach Strategy at the University of New South Wales. Welcome here, sir.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So the format of the show is very simple. We'd try to talk as much as we can about different topics in the next 10 minutes. So my question to you is that you worked with the Indian Foreign Services earlier and now have become a prominent educator. You also recently released your book, The Lockdown Chronicles. So how do you dabble between the education sector, diplomacy, and creative writing?
I find it very very therapeutic. Creative writing is a way of allowing your thoughts to flow. This really is my 17th book, wow. And so it's been a pretty joyful experience. And I write on various genres. My last book, which did reasonably well, I'm told, was a fiction title. It's called A House and Other Stories. The one before that was a little bit more philosophical because it was on transformative thinking. Mm-hmm. The one that just come out is called The Phoenix Rises, Lockdown Chronicles. It's an edited book and has about 44 different contributions from people of great eminence and standing, both in the field of journalism, of creative writing, people drawn from the professions like teaching, medicine. And so there's been a great array of thinking. And as the very well-known writer Jug Suraya put it when he wrote a column on the book a few weeks ago, he said that the pandemic could actually trigger a different style of writing.
So we recently heard that the American government has laid certain visa restrictions on international students. How do you think a decision like that would affect Indian students in general? And since you had the outreach for an Australian university, how do you think the Australian government is approaching it differently?
Look, I think the facts are very clear on the ground. We are talking about 6 months, that is from January till end of June. And the world prior to January was completely different. So in 6 months, we are seeing an extraordinary disruption. Now, in the education field, what is the disruption? If you look at Indian students, the number one destination for almost 7 decades has been the United States. A distant number two destination has been the UK. Now, what you have is with the pandemic actually going rampant in the US, there has been declining interest in the US. Now, there are understandable reasons for this, and as a consequence, other destinations, in particular, Australia has emerged as a very powerful destination to draw Indian students. There is now greater recognition that you can get world-class universities. Some of these universities are internationally ranked. UNSW is in the top 50, but it's not the only Australian university that is internationally ranked. Now, this is a perception that was not there before because everyone was looking at the US. I think the US is actually shooting itself in the foot. The international student market is over $100 billion. Can it take this kind of a risk and gamble and shut down, so to speak, no matter how temporarily, the international student market is a decision that the government needs to take. But I think it's going to backfire. I think it's going to divert students to other markets. And frankly, representing an Australian university of high distinction, I think it's a great decision the Americans have taken to send the students to Australia. We will welcome them.
Absolutely, sir. That sounds right, I believe. Sir, there are multiple ways in which Australian universities have tried to adapt to COVID. The UNSW departments have moved to a completely online format, whereas ANU, which is another prominent university, has they've opted for some sort of hybrid program. why do you think there's a difference in approach by different universities? And what do you think would be a better approach in the long run?
Well, I think to let's approach that question by looking at the elephant in the room. And in this case, it's the pandemic. And as a consequence, if you're going to put in travel restrictions and social distancing, your mode of delivery has to undergo a fundamental shift and change. Now, this transformation from face-to-face education to a non-face-to-face education needs to take place. I think many international education providers, they saw as part of their USP the student on campus. And consequently, online education was never really seen as something that people should aspire towards or something that was going to really jostle for space and become a front runner. Today, the pandemic has ensured that the only thing that you can offer in terms of education has to be online.
Absolutely, sir. I completely agree, and I feel that I have made up my mind to take off the next semester now. So before we conclude the interview, I have one last question, sir. So we have seen that during the pandemic, there are certain constraints that are being levied on education, be it higher education or even in schools. We have in India wherein syllabus is being selectively snipped under the guise of, we being in the middle of a pandemic. In Pakistan, there is the Public University Amendment Act, which in effect reduces the powers of the university vice chancellors. How do you think we can deal with a situation like that, especially given that there's a pandemic going?
Look, I mean, I think countries need to recognize a singular fact. That is, you have to make your demographics your dividend. Mm-hmm. And we talk about a very large young population in India. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the quality of education, and this is not statistics that I'm making up, you can just Google and it'll tell you that just about 5% of India's engineers are actually employable. Now, if that is a statistic that we derive extraordinary comfort from, then fair enough, continue the system. But most certainly, your demographics will never be a dividend. India can never become a country that the world can look into if its workforce, particularly its professional workforce, is incapable of doing what that education was meant to deliver to them. Our approach to education, therefore, needs to undergo a fundamental shift. I think the government of India took a positive decision when they decided to move from didactic education to experiential education. But across the globe, people had moved to experiential education 25 years ago. We are 25 years late. But let's look at it positively and say at least now, if never. So I think it's important for the government to really ask itself, what does it want education to do? Education is not an end in itself. It's a means. It's an instrument that society uses to deliver on the aspirations of its people and where society needs to get to. So if tweaking this and tweaking that, inserting this, changing the syllabus and the curriculum is going to achieve the aspirations of society, is going to contribute to human capital, to raising your GDP, by all means, go ahead and do it. But if the objective is only to tinker and not achieve the end result, then I'm afraid it's not worth it. It's not only is it not worth it, it's damaging. And I think countries need to be very mindful of the fact that your young population is the future of that nation. And what you give to the young population is going to determine the future of that nation. And education is the only instrument that you have. And therefore, let's not tinker with it. Let's only strengthen it, nourish it, and make sure it delivers. Because it's a global responsibility. It's not a national responsibility anymore. In a globalized world, it's a global responsibility to deliver.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much. This brings us to the end of 10 minutes. It was a pleasure having you, and we hope to see you very soon again.
It was a great honor for me, Akshat. Take care, stay safe, stay well. Thank you. Bye-bye.